You're listening to the Fitzy and Wippa podcast.
Front page of the Daily Telegraph today. Chris Dawson's on the front of it with the word murderer. 5 hours it took Justice Ian Harrison to come down with this decision.
Christopher Michael Dawson on the charge that on or about 8 January 1982 at Bayview or elsewhere in the state of New South Wales, you did murder Lynette Dawson. I find you guilty. You may sit down. Mr. Dawson, it will be necessary for you to be taken into custody.
It has gripped the nation, this case. And the man that kicked it off, well, the podcast came out in 2018, but I dare say I'd love to know when he started working on this case, was the man from the Australian, Hedley Thomas. He joins us now. Welcome, Hedley.
Good morning, guys.
Hedley, I suppose congratulations is in order. I mean, you resurfaced this case to an extent, and yesterday, what I'd love to know, going into that final day yesterday, what did you think? What did you think the outcome would be?
Man, I thought that he should be found guilty, and I believed that it was more likely than not that he would be, but we, of course, could not know, and it was incredibly nerve-wracking waiting for that audio, those words that the judge just played, because this had been 40 years for Lynn Dawson's family, and some 30 years since they first strongly suspected, in fact, knew in their hearts that he had killed Lynn. Yep. But over many years, they just failed to get justice.
It started at 10 o'clock yesterday. Everyone thought we were going to hear the decision quite quickly. It went for 5 hours, Hedley. Now, is the reason why Justice Ian Harrison did that, is that, did he go into so much detail to avoid the risk of an appeal? Is that why it went for so long?
Oh, look, I think every judge wants to avoid having an appeal overturn, the decision. But the judge was very thoughtful and measured and wanted to convey as much as he possibly could in his reasoning. And there'll be so much more, no doubt, in his written reasons, which he'll publish possibly later this week. We thought after a perhaps first half hour that it was all over for Chris, that he was doomed. And that's because the judge had already made a finding that Chris Dawson had lied about the so-called phone calls that Lynn made, about having spoken to her and her saying she needed more time away, and that she had been up the Central Coast with friends. The judge said that that was all part of a lying scheme. So we believed really early in the piece yesterday that it was finished, but then the judge started going through all these other points and matters that were in Chris's favour, and we were like, well, okay.
Which way is this going?
Yeah, is it possible this could actually turn around? But logically it couldn't. However, you just didn't know until the hammer finally fell.
But Chris Dawson can now appeal this, can't he?
Yeah, look, every convicted person has a right to appeal, but they've got to have good appeal points.
Sure. And
his lawyers will, no doubt, go over this judgment with a fine-tooth comb. In the end, the judge really relied on a number of documents and also answers that Chris Dawson had given himself that were part of the evidence in the murder trial. His interview with the police in 1991, a videotaped interview, that was integral, as well as his own handwritten statements and so on about what had happened to Lynn. So Chris's lies through these statements were, the judge said, born of a consciousness of his own guilt. They were lies to cover up what had happened and to distance himself from his former student, the babysitter, the woman who he had become utterly infatuated with.
God, what a story.
Hedley, can I just say, congratulations, mate. As a journalist, I mean, there must be so many of these cases in Australia, not just in Australia, but around the world, when you don't have a body, when you don't have a murder weapon. For you to start this journey and to where it ended up last night, I mean, there must be a moment where you reflected yesterday and said, this is why I got into this industry and this is what, you're chasing facts, you're chasing the truth. You want the truth to come out, and finally justice has been served. Was there a moment last night, Hedley, where you got to sit down and have a drink with the family? And has it hit you yet?
Yes. We sat down with Greg, and that's Lynn's brother, and Marilyn and their children and other members of the family, and Damien Loon, the detective who kicked it off. And I feel enormously privileged to have had this opportunity to investigate the case and to try to right a wrong. It was something that I understood was wrong way back in 2001. That's when I first reported on this case.
Yep.
It had just come through the first inquest, and it was so obviously alarming. The evidence was compelling, and you just, reading it as I did back then, reading the files in a Northern Beaches police station, could see patterns of conduct that were highly suspicious. But being able to unpack it in a podcast with a huge amount of detail over many weeks, I think that long form of journalism really makes an enormous difference. And being able, I'm 55, being able to sort of go from being a newspaper journo and starting out in the newsroom where they were just phasing out typewriters, and now, getting behind a microphone and understanding a little bit about audio and just being able to convey a story as vast and as important as this one to millions of people around the world. Yeah, it's a huge privilege, and I feel really grateful.
You've probably been asked this, but now that he's been found guilty, let's say, he's still guilty after the appeal, he goes to jail. I would dare say he serves the rest of his life out in jail. Do you think there'll ever be a moment, and you haven't got much from Chris Dawson or the Dawson twins or anyone like that, but you've got to know the man through other people. Do you reckon there'll ever be a time that he will tell us where that body is?
I can only hope for the family's sake.
That's what they want now, isn't it?
Yeah, but if Chris Dawson does the sums and works out how long he might live, he may see some upside in getting parole in return for showing authorities where Lynn's remains are.
Yes.
I think it'll be transactional if he does it. I doubt he'll do it out of any goodwill or sense of remorse, because he's probably going to keep denying he did this.
Yes. And just off topic, there was so much around the teacher's pet. There was talk of a movie. Has anyone bought those rights, Hedley? And this chapter now that it's closed and there is a guilty plea, I would dare say this movie is even bigger now. Who owns the right to that? And will we see that come to the screen?
Yeah, look, I think that there will be a screened version of The Teacher's Pet.
Where they had Hemsworth and Jackman wanted to get involved,
that's
didn't they?
right.
Hedley?
As I understand it, there was definitely that kind of interest.
God, who's going to play you, Hedley? There's the big question. Eric Banner?
I met Hugh Jackman. He's such a good guy.
Oh, Hugh Jackman will.
He's about 100 pounds lower than me.
No, Hedley.
We'd love to see that come to life, mate, because we have been absolutely blown away by not only the case, but the way it's been portrayed by yourself. So congratulations again.
Yeah. Thanks so much. I really appreciate it, guys.
And for more of Hedley Thomas's take on that, you can go to theteacherstrial.com.au.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye,
mate.
guys.
Take care.
You're listening to the Fitzy and Wippa podcast.